Chapter 4. A Chance to Help. At our dinner of dada takari, rice with lentils and curried vegetables, I listened carefully so I'd be sure to catch any mention of that bridge project. Suman, you are very quiet this evening, Aji said. Her voice was still weak, but she sat straight and she looked stronger. Bua chuckled. He is waiting to hear the village news. Aren't you, Suman? I gave him a big smile, and I waited for him to continue. As you heard, the village is thinking of building a tarpul, Bua said. What is that? Sita asked. It's a special kind of bridge, Bua said. It is supposed to be good for crossing rivers during the rainy season. It allows you to pull yourself through the air in a small car hanging from cables above the water. I'm going to meet with the team in charge of the tarpul project tomorrow. Everything was happening so fast, I could hardly believe Bua's words. Will it be done before rain begins this year, I asked. I hope so, Bua said. The sharp sound of Aji's cough cut my excitement short. My grandfather, Ali, reached over to touch her shoulder, as if to give her strength. This bridge is so important to our village, I thought. Bua, do you think I could come with you to the meeting, I asked. Yes, I think it would be a good idea, Suman, Bua said. You're getting old enough to help with a project like this. You may come with me. Chapter 5. Technology or Tradition. For the second day in a row, Bua and I rose early and walked to the edge of the river. This morning, however, my heart was light. From a distance, I could see a small group of people pointing to various spots along the riverbank. Suman, this is Kadar. He is our geotechnical engineer. And this is David Mister, Bua said as we arrived. He invented the tarpul. Namaskar, I said as I bowed towards David Mister. Namaskar, David Mister responded. I'm glad you've come, Suman, he continued. It's good to have young people see how tarpuls are built. Hopefully, by the time you're grown, there will be many more technologies like tarpuls around. Excuse me, David Mister, I said. What do you mean by technologies? Well, a technology is anything, system, or process that's designed to solve a problem. The tarpul is a technology that helps solve the problem of how to cross the river during the rainy season. He pointed across the river. We'll anchor poles into the foundation on the opposite sides of the riverbank, then run 2 cables and a rope from the pole on one side to the pole on the other. The car that people ride in travels along the cables. People riding in the car pull themselves along the rope. I see, I said. I tried to imagine riding high above the river. What would that be like to look down and watch the water flowing past, knowing it wasn't a danger? As David, Mister, and Bua fell into deep conversation, I looked around. Keldar began to use a machine to push a long tube into the ground. Then he twisted and lifted it. As he laid the tube on the ground, I could see the dirt inside. I knelt beside Keldar to get a better look. This helps me see the different layers of dirt that are in the ground here, he explained, as if he could tell I was curious. This is called a core sample. Different layers of soil, I asked? There are all kinds of soil, rocks, and organic material that make up the ground, said Kadar. As you go deeper and the mixtures change, part of a geotechnical engineer's job is to figure out the makeup of the layers of the ground at a certain spot. Some types of soil are better for anchoring structures than others. I looked at the tube and I saw the layers inside. That I understood, but I still had a question. What is a geotechnical engineer, said Kadar. Geotechnical engineers use what we know about science, math, and the layers of the earth to help people determine good locations for building structures. The tarpul that your village is going to build will be anchored by foundations on either side of the river. I'm here to help decide the best place to build the foundations. So you figure out by looking at the different types of soil, I asked? Yes, I look at the soil and some of the variables, Kadar explained. The width of the river is important. If you put a tarpul at the wide point, you'll need more materials and more support. We also look at areas that are unlikely to erode, where the soil won't be worn away. I know about erosion, I said. That's when the earth and the soil wash away by water. It started to happen to the terraces behind my house where we farm. Every time it rained, some of the soil washed away and the steps of the terraces wore away. Bua and I built walls to support the terraces. They stopped the erosion. That's a good example, Kadar said. River beds usually erode the fastest. The water washes away the soil on the river banks just as the rain washes away the soil of the terraces behind your house. We have to remember that when we are choosing a location for the tarpaulin, it wouldn't make sense to put anchor poles and foundations where river banks will erode quickly. I'm going to test the soil at a few other spots tomorrow, and then I can make a recommendation for where to put the tarpaulin anchors. I don't see why you need tests and recommendations. Bua was standing near us. He crouched down. The tarpaulin should be built where we always cross, at the narrowest point of the river. For thousands of years, everyone in our village has crossed the river at that spot. He looked towards the sandbags where Sita and I crossed to get to school every day, and where he and I carried Aji across the river. Every time we have to build a bridge at another point in the river, it has been washed away. Every time we lose money and days of work. I'm very grateful for this tarpaulin, Bua continued, but I see no reason why it should change the way of our fathers' fathers. Bua's voice had an edge of sternness in it, and a hush fell over the group of men. In that silent moment, Bua stood and bowed towards the other men. Kadar stood, and he and Bua bowed as well. I quickly did the same, and I scrambled to follow Bua as he returned home. I didn't say a word, but my mind was whirling. Kadar's expression had changed quickly. A moment ago, he had seemed relaxed. Now, the look on his face reminded me of how I felt when I wanted to argue with Bua about chores in the field. There seemed to be trouble in the air. Minutes passed as Bua and I walked in silence. Bua, I began. When I was talking with Kadar, what he said made sense. It seems to me that putting the tarpaulin where Kadar suggests is Suman. Bua said, I know I said you were old enough to help with this project, but you are never old enough to disrespect your elders. You cannot challenge my decision when you still have so much to learn about tradition in our village. Neither one of us spoke during the rest of the walk. Chapter 6. Anna Misses Game. The next day, I stood alongside my school friends, waiting to see what Miss Anna had brought for us. The game I'm going to show you, Miss Anna began, is called tetherball. All you need is a pole like this one, she said, pointing to the metal rod laying on its side at the edge of the schoolyard, with a ball hanging from a string attached to the top of the pole. What do you do with it? I asked. Miss Anna explained that two players stand opposite each other and try to hit the ball so that it wraps around the pole. I know it sounds easy, but each player is also trying to block the other's try, she explained. I get it, I said. I ran over to the rod, picked it up, and asked where should I put it. How about near the edge of the schoolyard so we don't get in anyone's way? Anna Miss suggested. I pushed the pole into the ground. Ready? I said. We broke up into teams and we started to play. Tepish stood on one side of the pole and I stood on the other. He hit the ball towards me and I gave it a hard shove back. Instead of the ball flying back towards him, though, the ball fell over. It sloped down to the ground. Woohoo there, Suman, said Animus. I think you put too much muscle in that swing. I ran over to the pole and pulled it up out of the ground. Sand trickled down from the sides of the hall to fill the spot where the pole had been. I crouched to take a better look. We all know I'm the strongest kid in the village, I joked, but maybe this was a bad spot for the pole. I thought for a few moments. The soil here is sandy and soft, not firm. I wonder what would happen if we put the pole along the path from school to the water well. The soil there is hard and packed down from everybody walking across it so much. That's a pretty smart idea, Animus said. Where did you come up with that? I met someone yesterday, a geotechnical engineer, I said. I was talking to Boa about the best spot to build a bridge across the Karnali. Well, I think your idea is a good one, Anna said. We'll have to try tomorrow, though. It's time for our math lesson. Everybody inside, she called.